Hello and welcome to Chaos in the Paddock. I'm back, and today I have someone very, very special with me. Another FIA accredited journalist, Thiemo. Hi, Thiemo.
Hello, thank you for inviting me on, and apparently I'm very special, so we'll take that. So thank you for inviting me on
Just
here today.
take the compliment, Thiemo. I'm feeling nice today,
I'm
so you
taking
might
it.
as well use it.
I'm taking it. Don't you worry, I will take it.
Why don't you introduce yourself to us? Tell me what you do. Maybe talk about your podcast a little, because I know you have a few. And for those who have been following me for quite a while and you come across Timo's profile, it's literally listed and I'm confused.
Yeah, no, there's a few bits there. So I'm Timo, in case you hadn't guessed that bit already. I'm a motorsport journalist, podcast host, and a bit of a PR consultant as well. So as you've mentioned as well, I've got a few podcasts starting with On the Curbs, where I pretty much just interview anyone and everyone from the world of motorsport. That's been going for a few years now. And I also co-host an F1 and feeder series podcast called the Undercut Podcast. Then, for something a little bit different, a bit more stateside, I recently joined an IndyCar podcast for the Across the Pond Motorsport Network, which hell of a good season to start doing that for with how great IndyCar has been. And then as well, just because what's one more at this point, a Nitrocross podcast focused on, well, everything Nitrocross and the bizarre and wonderfully bonkers world that is. So that's where I'm in with motorsport, and you can find links to all of those through my social media, as you mentioned there, as there's a bit of everything, which is t.albers.daily on the curves. You search for that. A bit of a mouthful. I'm working on that one, but for now, that's what it is.
Don't worry, Chaos in the Paddock is also a mouthful, but it's more fun to say than your full name. Unless someone's really mad at you. I feel like I'd say your full name if you were annoying me, which you haven't yet, so it's
I'd
fine.
just rather not get there. So
Well, we've had a very interesting weekend because it was full of motorsports. I didn't realize that MotoGP was going on as well, and obviously
there
IndyCar,
was a lot.
WEC, and F1, which is mainly why we're here today. But I know you were also keeping up with the IndyCar. So, how's your sleep been going?
Sleep's been all right. It's a couple of early mornings because of the F3 and the F2, which are obviously very fun weekend for both of them at Monza, IndyCar, double header, Milwaukee, first time there in about a decade, I think, in two very good races for very different reasons. NASCAR as well. It's the last race before the playoffs, so you had a bit of fun with that. Plus work, as you say. So yeah, it's been a little bit chaotic, which I feel like is in keeping with this podcast. So that's about where it should be, I think.
Well, because I need your brain right now. So I wanted to make sure that you're actually I wanted to make sure that you're actually okay because I need you on the spot to give me your hot take for the F1 race.
I think it was the Monza Grand Prix that we needed because the last couple of years have not been the best ones that we've gotten, and we got used to a certain standard at Monza in terms of craziness. And while it wasn't necessarily the craziest race we've had there, it was definitely unexpected in a lot of ways, and we got a lot more out of it than we were potentially hoping, which is pretty much how you could sum up this whole season so far. So I was all for it.
Then describe it in one word.
Oh, in one word, geez. Geez. Yeah, there we go.
Did you have a particular highlight? Besides, I mean, let's take out Leclerc winning because I feel like that's a highlight for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, loved that, but I was immediately going to go for that lap one overtake that Piastri did on Norris. It was
Oh, that's a good
just,
one.
oh, so ballsy and unexpected, and you just think, oh, what are they going to do? Are they going to keep it close and sensible, kind of a bit like 2021, where it's just kind of stay in formation, do your thing? And then maybe they had the conversation and Piastri went, no, this is a Grand Prix, mate. I'm doing what I'm here to do, which is I'm going to go after the win. And if you're as good as everyone says you are and as you say you are, then you won't have any problem fighting me. And just kind of caught Norris napping at a place on the track, bearing in mind where you're not really expecting that sort of an overtake, especially not straight away. Just mwah, loved it.
That turned a lot of people on, and I have to say that I was watching it from the sidelines a bit, and I was taking my notes. And just to follow my notes real quick, I said good start for Lando, and then I said Holy shit, Oscar Piastri overtook in all caps.
Yeah, it was one of those things you think, hey, he's made it to turn one in the lead. Finally, he's managed to break
Lando,
that, and
oh yeah.
then yeah, 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 and then it was at the expense of by the end of lap one, you are still not going to actually be in the lead of the Grand Prix despite starting on pole. But he made it further than he usually does, which progress.
I mean, I really wanted to start off talking about McLaren because after that overtake, I was like, oh, Oscar means business. And I knew that he was a serious driver.
Mm,
He is kind of like a silent killer. That's what I usually call him because he doesn't really show much emotion, which is okay. I think that leaves him mysterious, that leaves him interesting. And when he does say something or he shows something, then you're usually pleasantly surprised by it. And I have a feeling that Lando is starting to get scared. I don't know what you've been thinking about that.
yeah, I agree with your sentiments about him being a silent assassin type. He is a younger kind of scary version of Kimmy in a way, because at least
Oh
with
yeah.
Kimmy, you were like, this is what we expect because that's just Finns. But he's an Aussie, and we're used to like Ricardo and other people being more jovial and outward. I mean, even Jack Doohan, we've not seen that much of him lately, but he's always kind of open there. And Piastri's a nice enough kid, don't get me wrong. But when he's in the car and you see how disappointed he is with P2 and things on a normal basis, and even when he wins a race and he's kind of like, yep, but I can do better next time. And you're like, I love that from him because it shows how serious he is. And I think maybe Norris would have been like that when he first started out if he had the car that McLaren have had for the last couple of years now. It would be interesting to see if the roles were reversed in terms of timings, what that would have been like. But Piastri was never not serious business to deal with. I mean, you don't have the track record that he does and think, oh yeah, this will be fine. I should be a walk in the park, even if I have to do have a few years under my belt. And everyone goes on about Kimi Antonelli being this new threat. I'm like, you haven't even seen Piastri get started yet. So let's not forget about him in the meantime. And yeah, if I was Norris, I wouldn't necessarily be worried, but I would be reassessing because that's not a driver who is going to be playing second fiddle for too much longer. Bearing in mind Mark Webber's his manager. Webber knows exactly what it's like to have to play second fiddle, even when you don't want to, and when you maybe want to ignore certain papaya rules. So I think if Norris has got what it takes and he wants to be champion, be it this year or any year, he's got to figure out how to deal with Piastri because it comes back to the age-old thing of doesn't matter who else is on the grid that you're racing against, the one person you need to beat is your teammate. And he did not do that yesterday, and he started ahead of him.
I mean, granted, Lando and Oscar are on pretty much equal footing. I think they have a pretty similar skill set, and both of them are quite ballsy. One thing I do have to say though is for me, just watching this whole thing come down, especially yesterday, I think Lando is starting to become a little bit whiny when things don't go his way, which is why McLaren do need to make a decision at this point what the game plan is, because I think that's what's missing. They're throwing away their whole championship because they're not making a decision on who needs to take the lead, what's Oscar going to do, what's the game plan in certain situations. I mean, Oscar's move was very unexpected, but just even Lando, how he felt in that moment and how he was acting after that race, you kind of have to think, okay, are McLaren doing a good decision with their team strategy right now? I mean, they pitted Oscar way too early, and that kind of threw away the win.
Yeah, it shows that there are still very much chinks in the armor there in terms of them being a championship winning team. The constructors is probably on and can take these questionable or not bulletproof decisions in terms of where Red Bull are at the moment because of the car. If they can't figure that out, then the constructors is kind of theirs for the taking. Although I quite like Ferrari as an outside bet for that because they're not a million miles away from either of
That's
them
what I
either. If
want
you
to
look at the
say
points,
too. We can't rule
um,
Ferrari out.
no, exactly, and it was kind of oh, I didn't realize you were that close. Interesting. I'm not going to say anything more about it, but just interesting. Um, and as for the drivers' championship, I think if Max can pull this off, it'll be because of himself but as much as the other teams and how they handle this situation in equal measure because Verstappen just needs to be consistent. He doesn't need to win. He doesn't necessarily need to be on the podium. He just needs to keep the gap at a sizable enough length, really. And even if it's only 1 point at the end of Abu Dhabi, it's still enough to win and make himself a four-time champion. And I think McLaren need to, like you say, decide what they're doing on that front. And if that's just saying to Oscar, look, we'll reassess next year about what we can do and we'll give you a bit more reward there. But mathematically, you're not in with a chance, Lando is. It'd be great if we could get the double as a team. We've got to try that. And you need to be a team player here. You've been a great team player before. There's no reason why he can't do that. And it'd be great to see him in that rear gunner position a bit of the way that Perez was in 2021 because he played that role excellently there. But if they don't sort that out, and if Ferrari and Mercedes keep coming in and doing their thing, and Max can just keep doing what Max does and not necessarily finishing too highly, but getting consistent points, then they've potentially only got themselves to blame come the end of the year if they don't have the driver's title.
Oh boy. I mean, Red Bull has been giving everyone a headache recently, more especially the Red Bull fans. I know in Sky Germany, Helmut Marko is very frustrated every time Ralph comes up and asks him about the situation at Red Bull. It's quite interesting because one moment that really stuck out for me yesterday was when Max on the radio said, I need everyone awake, even though this is a shit position, I still want people to be working. Like, come on, let's keep pushing.
Hmm.
And I think that's kind of concerning. It's very concerning for a
It
team like
was nice to
Red
hear
Bull.
that from Max.
Nice to hear that
Um,
from Max. I thought things like that should be coming from Christian, like Max, wake up or something like that. Or Checo should wake up. There you go. Let's have
yeah,
that
it
video.
well, we might be waiting a little longer on that one. But with Verstappen, it felt like it was his inner Hamilton kind of peering there of yes, this isn't an ideal position to be in, but we still need to maximize it as much as we can because there's still a big fight on here, not just for him personally for the drivers' championship, but you can't sleep on the constructors if you're Red Bull either. That's going to be the one that you're likely to lose, and that's where the money is for the team that they're going to really want. Um, so yeah, it was interesting to hear that, and some of the other team rages as well with Red Bull were uncharacteristic of them from what we've seen. It shows they really are in an odd space at the moment, and they're not entirely sure what to do about it. Which is great for us because it means drama and different stuff on track. I mean, it's mad that Max hasn't won a Grand Prix since Spain. Um, so it's great from that perspective. But if you're Red Bull, you need to be doing exactly what he said yesterday and wake up and deal with the situation at hand because it's not going to get any better if you're just deciding I'll go for a nap and hope it's better when I wake up.
Do you think they have a chance of, you know, pulling through again, or do you think it's over for this season?
Constructors, it really depends. I mean, you've got the whole Perez situation as well there in terms of he needs to play a better role there. He's done all right since the summer break by his own standards, but it's also mad that he's not been in the top five since Miami. Um, and it really depends on how well together McLaren and Ferrari are. Both are still teams that are not back up to the strength that they need to be in order to successfully win a championship, and we've seen that with both of them this year. So, is it a case of Red Bull doing enough to win, or is it the others helping it get there, helping them get there through their own losses? And kind of the same with the drivers. So, neither one's a done deal. The drivers is potentially more so, but that's because Max can do what Max can do, whereas the constructors relies on the whole team operating on another level. And of the three teams that are viable for it, they are the only ones that can wake up and smell the coffee and get themselves there because they know what to do and they've done it before. Whether or not they do it in time is another matter entirely. And also, if you've got races like Baku and Singapore coming up, where historically pretty crazy and chaotic to live up to the name of the podcast that we're currently on, who knows? A couple of awkward DNFs here and there could throw everything out of contention completely. So who knows?
I mean, I have to say, I was looking at my predictions for the 2024 season yesterday, and I still have four more things that I haven't been able to cross off, and that is Checo gets replaced, Albon or Hulkenberg on a podium, Daniel Ricciardo on pole, and Red Bull will crash into each other. And week after week, I've been
We can see
asking,
all of the next two races.
that's why. I feel like it's a sign. I mean, I feel like it's going to be a Red Bull will crash into each other moment next week. Is it next week? The race is in 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
There we go. But I do think at this point, when Checo is not performing, all eyes are on Daniel Ricciardo to see if he can get up to the performance that Red Bull would want him to be in to be the second driver to Max. I mean, that's obviously something he will have to
Hmm.
deal with. How do you think that's looking, especially after Monza? Because we had some early incidents in this race with Daniel Ricciardo. He did collide with Nico Hülkenberg, and that did result in penalties and eventually took out Yuki Tsunoda. That happened so randomly. Do you think we're going to see Daniel in that Red Bull? Because Red Bull's mistake was keeping Checo in. That's how they threw away their Constructors' Championship.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I want to see him in that second Red Bull, even if it's just for a season, just to see if you give him the car, does he still have what it takes? Because I think that's all he wants really. He said himself that if he's not up to par, then he'll be the first one to say, replace me, I'll go. I clearly don't have what it takes anymore, but I want to have that opportunity, and he's not had that for a little while. His performance in Monza was a bit frustrating at times because we could see at moments the Ricardo of old with how he was driving, it felt like. The incident at the start with the Haas was unfortunate, um, but one of those things. And then the second penalty wasn't his fault. That was the pit crew member just go basing off instinct and touching the car. It was really annoying, but stuff happens. Um, and it's also still an RB at the end of the day. It's not going to be able to outperform certain other cars on the grid. So there's only so much you can do with it. But he is dragging it into the places where it should be most of the time. Yuki obviously outperforms him a bit because he's just been embedded in that team for a lot longer. He knows what to do. He's been more incremental in developing it. And also, it's not worth forgetting that Ricardo has coached him a bit, both during his time as a third driver and just as a teammate. So maybe that's rubbing off a bit as well. But I would like to see him in there because I think at the moment he could at the very least do exactly what Perez is doing, which if that's the bar you're measuring it at, you're not losing anything. And why not make that change and then see?
I feel like they should test that out eventually, especially with how Checo is doing. That should be allowed. Just make that switch for
If
one
they
race.
lose the Constructors' Championship for the end of
This
the
is-
season and it looks like there's nothing to lose by trying it, stick him in there for a couple of races. Stick him in for Qatar and Abu Dhabi or something. See what happens.
I mean, I think the most consistent team so far, like, let's just like go down the grid a bit. I mean, we have Sauber, we have Williams, we have
They
Haas,
are very consistent.
and we have Alpine. And I have to say, when I was thinking about giving these teams attention, because I specifically, told you that, the word
Hmm.
consistent kept on popping up, especially with Sauber. I mean, they're quite uneventful. I don't know if it's not
Yeah,
necessarily a good thing, but I do
it's not.
appreciate them not having huge accidents, not crashing into anyone that much, not pulling
So
attention.
you're pleased that they're able to do the bare minimum for a team at the pinnacle of motorsports?
We have to look at this in a positive way. I mean, Sauber is
It's
going to turn
difficult
into
because, and
Audi
I'll tell
eventually.
you why it's difficult. In one Grand Prix weekend versus however many races we've had now, 15 or so that we've had this year, Colapinto is already ahead of Bottas in the world driver standings because he's already finished higher in a Williams in one race than Bottas has been able to do in that stake all season long. That is the situation that Stake are in
I
right now.
know,
So you're saying about trying
I
to find a
know.
positive, it's a little bit difficult.
We still have to
But I
try.
will say one thing about them. I do like their livery, but that's about all I can say.
Oh my God. I don't like the livery. Then again, I'm not really a fan of the
Oh,
color
who's not
green.
being positive now?
I mean, I'm trying to, stay positive because, if we had a working theory going on within the Chaos in the Paddock team, and that theory was if Kimi Antonelli wasn't going to be announced for Mercedes, we actually thought that Bottas would make a comeback because he was a great second driver to Lewis. And he was a
It's not
great
out of the
teammate.
realm of
If
possibility, though.
Lewis didn't, if Lewis was having trouble, Bottas was there to take it. He was just right behind.
Hmm.
He was the most consistent one. And I was thinking, okay, they might do that. I mean, it could be a possibility. Someone did say Daniel Ricciardo to Mercedes, but that was never going to happen. I told them, like, we have to be realistic here. The most realistic one is Bottas coming back. Like, I didn't even see Carlos Sainz in that Mercedes seat.
I saw it more likely Carlos Sainz than Daniel Ricciardo, but yeah, neither one was particularly likely to happen, unfortunately, especially with Toto being so set on Antonelli. But yeah, Bottas wouldn't have been a bad option to get him in there for a year. It would have been interesting to see if he would have said yes. Obviously, he'd be partnering with Russell rather than Lewis, and the team's in a different place than it was when he left. So the dynamic would have been interesting. And at the very least, he'd probably score more points than he has done in the last few years combined since leading Mercedes with one single Grand Prix at Mercedes next year. But we're just not going to find out now. And I think it's a team that is going to become Audi, like you say, and I hope that they're going to do better. I mean, it's just, they can't get much worse in some respect because I like Hulk a lot and I want to see him succeed a little bit more. He's having a really great season and he's one of these what if drivers, as everyone famously knows. But I think in order to do that, the best way forward is to have a completely clean slate on terms of drivers. And they've already got one step there with Hulkenberg for next year, and I don't think Bottas or Joe should be there
But
alongside him.
Bottas
They
is
need someone
apparently
else.
really in consideration. I mean, let's put it this way. As much as I respect Joe and how much of a clean driver he doesn't really play dirty. I think his time for now is over. I don't think he's going to get a new seat at this point. One thing I do have to say is okay, if they retain Bottas, I might understand why from the development aspect of a car because he does have more experience than
Hmm.
Joe. That would be the reason why they're going to keep him. I have been hearing that Audi want an all-German team. So ideally, who's the next German person who could hop in?
Well, yes, there is that option, but I think if you want experience and then you don't need Bottas because you've got Hulkenberg, and if you want a bit of youth to go alongside that experience, but you want it to be an interesting but more incapable pair of hands, why not go for someone like Teo Porcher? And if they have a bad season or two, it doesn't matter as much because then you can just replace them accordingly. But at least it's a driver who's been through the mill a bit, has had multiple kind of been racing in Super Formula, in IndyCar, in Formula Two, has had F1 tests, you know,
So you would
isn't
put
totally new
Boucher
to it.
in.
And
I
I
thought you
put
were gonna
Porsche in
say
because
someone
as much
else.
as I no, because I suspected you were going for either Mick or Seb
I
in
wasn't
that
gonna
second
put Mick
seat.
or Seb in there. I know for a fact that Seb is not coming back. That's because I always have a conversation with his
Well,
brother
which
about
German were
it.
you referring to then?
I was saying that lots of people in Germany are hoping for Mick to come back. And I mean, I've been stressing so much
Oh,
because
Mick,
every
yeah.
time I turn on my broadcast, if I'm home and I'm not at a race, or if I'm walking around the paddock and I hear it, then everyone in Sky Germany asks every single person they can get their hands on that speaks German, like Mike Crack, Toto Wolff, and Helmut Marko. All of them have to talk about Mick on a daily basis at this point. And everyone is like, oh, Mick, he just didn't get a fair shot at Haas. He just, needs a little bit more time and he needs another chance to show what he can do. And I'm like, listen, Toto, he's your reserve driver. You could have done that for him in a different way if you really, really wanted that. And I don't like even Helmut Marko is saying, oh, yeah, Mick deserves another shot. And I'm like, he's just saying that so that Red Bull can avoid some sort of nasty PR. I was talking about it with a bunch of driver managers recently, and they said that Mick is not going to get another chance, not in a while. Something drastic has to happen for that. Ideally, I would put Bortoleto in that seat.
Hmm.
Not a German pick, but after this weekend, I feel like there have been some. There have been some rumors about Bortoleto being in contention for the Sauber slash Audi seat. And after his race, his feature race, not the sprint race, I was very impressed. And I know you were too.
Yeah, I mean, he's a Formula 3 champion. He's come into Formula 2 this year as a rookie and has really impressed enough to get McLaren's attention, as we've seen, and a brilliant drive where he was able to showcase his skills and just taking advantage of the opportunities that come his way in that feature race. Two brilliant acclaiming P22 in the starting grid two first is not too shabby, especially at such a quick circuit like Monza. I wouldn't be against putting him in there. It'd be nice, especially if he'd win the F2 title for an F2 champion, to get straight into F1 for a change instead of having to wait around for ages and potentially just never get a seat. It's kind of ridiculous how you've got more chance of getting to F1 if you don't win the title than if you do. But that's a separate conversation for another day. So I'm not against that. It's the same kind of way that I wouldn't be against Bestie going in there either if we wanted another kind of young gun, but who knows what he's doing, alongside an experienced driver like Hulkenberg. Um, but I think that as much as we have this chat, it's probably going to be Bottas.
You think so? If it happens, I'll buy you a
I'd
drink.
like to be wrong. I mean, you keep offering drinks and I keep making predictions that turn out to be wrong, unfortunately, and I'm not being able to capitalize on this at all, which is terrible for me. Great for you, you're saving money, but um, yeah, I think this one may be more of a safe one. I'd like to be wrong though on this. In this instance, I'm trying to talk myself out of a beer, which is very unusual.
Thiemo, come on. It's a party. It's always a party. So if you get this right and Bottas gets the Audi seat and they retain him, I'll get you a drink. I say Bortoleto is gonna come in.
Well, if that happens, I'll definitely buy you a drink because I'll happily be wrong.
I'll fly to wherever you are just for this. I mean, it was let's talk about the youngsters for 1 second because we had a couple of debuts. I mean, not a couple of debuts, just two. We had Antonelli in FP1 and we had Franco
By definition, that's a
Colapinto.
couple.
Yeah. Timo, I haven't had the full ice cream yet, so my brain is still not functioning. But how did we feel about, let's start with Colapinto because there's obviously more to that. He was replacing Logan Sargeant. And the podcast before this one, where we were talking about Sandford and the whole situation with Logan, just before we recorded it, the news came out. So I was, briefing Claire, who was on last week. All of a sudden, our phones rang and they said Logan Sargeant out, Franco Colapinto in. How did you think he performed?
It was It was surprising the news, not because of Colapinto not observing a shot, but I just thought if they would have done it, it would have been over the summer break. Why give Sergeant Zandvoort? It seemed a bit curious, but I'm sure there's valid reasons behind the scenes. In terms of Colapinto's performance, I think he did pretty well, but I think we've got to take it with a pinch of salt because Williams are historically strong at Monza, and they've proven that over the last few years in particular. So he's going to be tested over the next couple of weekends, in particular, with Baku and Singapore can be very tumultuous at times. But at the same time, he did a really solid job. He didn't crash. He didn't muck up particularly. He had that little off in Lesmo too during qualifying, which compromised his starting position. So it would have been interesting to see what he could have done from a bit further up the grid, if he'd have been on par with Albon or not, and maybe get E10. Um, but very good for him. And I think the fact that he knows he's not getting that seat next year because Sainz has it means that there's absolutely no pressure on him whatsoever in the way that there clearly was with Sargent. There is a little bit with Albon because he's always trying to make sure that he does enough to keep the seat there because as much as he has a contract, we know what those can be worth some days. So for him, he's just on a flat out charge to the end of the season. He's got nothing to lose, and it shows because he's just driving as if this is what he's been doing all season.
I have to say, when I saw that little issue in Quali, the first thing I said was Logan Sargent would have crashed it. Colapinto saved it. And I think that shows a lot. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, potentially harsh, but not untrue.
I don't even know how to be nice in this situation anymore because listen, we criticize McLaren, we
Used up all your
criticize
nice stuff on
Lando.
Sauber.
I know, but like when it comes to Logan Sargeant, I've always had a bit of an issue because last season I was still quite forgiving about, talking about him and, all of those crashes and this like those mistakes that he made because okay, he's a rookie. You're not a rookie if you're suddenly doing things perfectly. I mean, not even Oscar Piastri had a perfect rookie season. It was a very strong rookie season,
Mm.
especially because the car in the beginning, that McLaren, was horrible. I don't even know how to describe it. It was really bad. And all of a sudden you have both of them in the podiums, Oscar winning a sprint, and that's insane. Like a rookie winning a sprint in that McLaren that was really bad. That's something to be very proud of. And you couldn't really compare the Williams and the McLaren at that time. You still can't today. But when Logan came in this season, I don't know, he looked very stressed and haggard. Like he wasn't driving as relaxed. And I think everyone knows that his seat was always on the line. But like you said, I think it was a
Yeah,
very bad mistake that they didn't replace him before Sanford because that's harsh.
it's also just a little sloppy from a PR and media perspective for me. It's not as clean as it could have been. Like you have this massive break to do it, and you don't. And I'm sure they've got. I hope they've got good reasons for it, but that's the way they went with it. I think with Sargent, it's one of those things where it goes back to when they hired him in the first place. I don't think he was ready for Formula One then,
Mm.
but they wanted to pick from their junior academy, which is nice for an F1 team to actually do that for a change instead of going somewhere else. Because otherwise, what's the point in having these academies? But in this instance, it did bite them a little bit on the arse because he wasn't ready yet, I don't think, and they would have been better off having someone from outside for a year. I don't know who at that point. I'd need to have a think back, or maybe just choose someone else if some from someone else's young driver program and do a deal that way. Um, and yeah, it just hasn't improved enough as we've seen over the course of the season. When his highest finish position was P11 in Silverstone, and that was a bit of a crazy race at times as well. So it kind of good that he was able to capitalize on that, but still wasn't able to get a point. Um, Frustrating, but I think just speaks to Williams' problem overall that they've been having. In similarly, like we were talking about McLaren earlier, not being where they need to be yet to be uh, to definitely be reckoned with. You can still see the chinks in the armor as Williams are rebuilding. You can see that with them still. But they're on an upward trajectory. And I think that choosing Colapinto but not keeping him for next year is the right move because this way you've got the pressure off, you're not losing anything. He's probably not going to do a worse job of it than Sargent did. And you know that you can then have a very good reserve driver with him next year, potentially with all of this data that you've managed to get from him as well to complement what Sainz and Albon are doing, who are then going to be make a very strong lineup.
I mean, Science and Albon don't have their appendix anymore, so I don't think he might be of use. Just to put that out there. But I was also thinking that Colapinto would make a great reserve driver. Would he go back to F2? Probably. I think he would. I think that's what he had in mind, unless
Yeah,
they
it'd
put him as a
be.
full-time reserve driver or like a development driver of some sort.
I think the risk with putting him in Formula Two then is what happens if he doesn't perform. Just from his perspective, then it compromises a potential future there. Whereas if he goes off to, I mean, IndyCar is the only thing I keep thinking of just because I'm trying to think of a rough equivalent. If he goes there or goes to Formula E or something like this, just so that it's not lower, it's just different. If that makes sense,
Speaking
it's
of
it's a
Formula
different
E,
level
we do
comparatively.
have another rookie there, though, also fresh from F2, Taylor Barnard.
Yes, yes, we do. It's all very incestuous.
I know. I was thinking like, listen, if Formula E could offer these rookies a chance, they're gonna take it because when it came to, I know this was in our group chat, so shout out to the group chat, Tortured Journalists Department, you guys. I think it was Jack Smith that said, would you rather pay to drive or be paid to drive? And I think that was the decision that, was given to Taylor Barnard when he got that contract. And I mean, there are rumors. rumors in quotation marks floating around that Colapinto paid for his seat, which I'm pretty sure he did, right? And like, let's be real. Let's be.
There's been a lot of those quote unquote rumors from a lot of different places, all saying the exact same thing, including the amount of money. So I think, yeah, that's. But again, if we take that question, would you rather get paid to race in Formula E, or would you rather pay to race in Formula One? Slightly different question, slightly different answer you're going to get out of
I'm gonna quote this. This needs to be a post. This is gonna be a
it.
post. Oh yeah, I mean,
I'm happy I'm quotable.
sometimes, Timo. Sometimes. Don't be too happy about
I have
that.
my
But what
moments.
about Kimi Antonelli? I mean, this was Formula One's best kept also in quotation
Best
marks
kept secret, huh?
secret. I mean,
Yeah, you're quotable to that. Yeah, I'm still undecided on this one. I
really?
like, yeah, just because I like the ballsiness of it from Mercedes, but
Oh boy.
there's a big asterisk next to it. No, he's clearly a decent driver. We've not seen what we wanted to see from him in Formula 2 this year, but I don't know if that's just because of all of the hype around him makes us expect too much from someone who, by definition, is has been a child for most of the year. Um, and if he doesn't do well straight off the bat, especially if Mercedes do have a decent car straight from the off next year, then you risk traumatizing, you know, a child, let's face it, at the point, at the very least, a young adult. And he's then burned out by the end of the year. And what have you really achieved? When instead you could have just put him in Formula 3 this year, put him in Formula 2 next year, and have him ready for F1 in 2026 and not really lost anything. This constant search for a new Verstappen that is hindering a lot of teams, it feels like, when there's still perfectly good other drivers available who, a bit like the Perez Ricciardo situation, are not going to do any worse. So why not just put them instead and take your time nurturing? It's kind of, if Antonelli's great off the bat, then excellent, you look like a hero. But if he doesn't, and it doesn't happen quickly enough, we both know what Formula One's like. We know what the world is like, and the fan base in terms of reactions. That's going to get interesting, and you just hope there is a big enough support network there for him. I'd like to see him succeed because it'd be interesting, but then it also potentially feeds into that whole notion of, right, let's find the next who's younger than him, who can we make a special exception for, and it just keeps getting a bit spirally, and I don't know if that's the best idea
Lindblad,
either. And
Marvin
I'd rather just take a bit of
Lindblad.
time to exactly, yeah, Lindblad's who I was thinking of because he's doing pretty well. He's best placed rookie in F3
But I
this
see
year,
Christian
breaking a
Mansell
few
in
records.
I see Christian Mansell more in F1 than I do Lindblad, if I'm being honest.
Which, yeah, maybe that's whatever you've been smoking. But I like Mansell too. But also from this perspective, he's too old already. You know, no one's interested in him. He's 19. Oh, too old at this point, and that's where it gets into really murky waters. You're thinking there's all these great drivers already. You look at Drogovic, you look at Vesti, you look at Pourchaire. Hell, let's bring Mick into it. I'm kind of amazed Doohan managed to get the seat for Alpine because you think they're all looking for someone who's about 5 years old at the moment, and all these other perfectly good drivers are just missing out for no through no
How
fault of
old
their
is
own.
Doohan?
So
Doohan is
I
the
think,
same age as me, I think.
well, yeah, but that's the thing. It feels like I was pleasantly surprised when this happened because we're just not used to it at the moment because everyone's looking for the next wunderkind.
Hmm. No, I mean, I have to say I almost forgot about Doohan because I haven't seen him do anything recently. I mean, Kimi Antonelli, I do the feeder series, so obviously I've been watching Kimi Antonelli, I've been watching Ollie Berman. Who else have I been watching? Isaac Hajar. That's who I have in my eye to be like Checo's replacement if Daniel Ricciardo says no or decides he does
It's
want to
not going to be
retire.
Hadjar.
It's gonna be Hajar. He's
It's not
good.
going to be not replacing Perez though. They'll go into the RB. They'll put Yuki or Lawson into that Red Bull before they stick Hadjar in. Because if they
They're
stick
not,
Hadjar in there, everyone else is going to just quit and
honey,
go, "What's the
Timo.
bloody point in
Timo, they're
joining
not gonna
RB?"
put Yuki in that Red Bull. Lawson, yes, but they're not gonna put Yuki in there.
We're not going to put Hadjar in it either. That'd be silly.
Oh my God.
You think Max's team radio was a
You
bit
know what?
spicy at the
We're
weekend? Have you
definitely
heard
gonna do
anything
a
Hadjar
different
said?
podcast talking about the feeders, and I will get the girls who do the feeders on here as well? Because I want to see this fight
Please
take
do.
place. Just you guys, I'll sit and eat my popcorn because it is very interesting. And I think Monza showed a lot of what can happen. I mean, even in the F3 finale,
Hmm.
you saw what happened to Luke Browning, who was actually my pick. Yeah, I thought he was gonna win.
You just
And
stop picking people.
no, I mean, I have my favorites. I can have my favorites, and this
It
is
just doesn't
not
go well for them.
necessarily, this is a fun podcast, so we can play favorites in this point. But, I think with Monza and seeing, the frustration with Red Bull, seeing how Colapinto, how many positions he went up 6 positions. It was so close to being a Ferrari 1-2, but then Lando managed to overtake, and Oscar came right behind and also overtook Lando, and there was these things with the pits. I don't know. It was fun. I was enjoying. I was screaming. I want to watch a race with you because I think you don't scream. I keep on thinking, when I knew that I wanted you on here, I kept on thinking, okay, I wonder how Thiemo is whenever he's watching a race. Is he screaming? Is he gasping? Is he running to get a glass of wine the same way we do?
Not quite in the same way, I imagine. I'm probably more of an Oscar Piastri if we're going to do that kind of comparison. But I definitely do have my moments where if something looks like it's happening, I will have that toe tap and the foot movement that Christian Horner has when he's on the pit wall when it's going well and he's not sure if it's going to be able to get there on time. That sort of thing where I wasn't letting myself believe, for example, that Hamilton could actually win at Silverstone until about the third to last corner from the end on the final lap because
Oh,
I
I
didn't
was
want to jinx it.
crying. Like I was
Same way
crying by the
yesterday. Um, understandable, but in the same way yesterday, I was kind of once he was through Ascari, I was like, maybe Leclerc has this, maybe it's going to be all right, and a bit of fist pumping. But that's probably the extent to which it gets, I think.
Well, let's talk about your
But there's an
predictions
inner joy.
though.
There's an inner
You
joy.
didn't you predict science in P1? I have to pull up the Insta.
Yeah, I got my Ferrari and Italian theme right. My actual specific predictions wrong.
Yeah, you had Sainz in P1, Leclerc in P2, and Hamilton in P3, with neither McLaren in the top 10. That came to bite you in the ass really quick.
I wanted to be bold and different, and I thought if that happens, we've had a hell of a Grand Prix, and we still got a hell of a Grand Prix, just
No one got it
in a
right,
different
though.
way.
No, no, none of us got it right. The only thing I got right was Colapinto will finish just below the top 10, which has happened. He was in
You were
P12.
vague enough, so you succeeded. Yes.
Yeah, I put science in P2. Sophie was the only one who put Norris in P1. Actually, Kim put Leclerc in P1. So she got that. She was the best out of all of us in that sense. But no, no one got it right.
I think none of us
And
dared
that's
dream that
okay.
Leclerc would be able to get it again, but I'm quite happy that we were all proven wrong on that one. I don't mind being wrong when it's still a good result and it's something like this.
And if it's fun racing, I think I would have just turned the telly
Hmm.
off if it was a Red Bull win. But frankly, after last week in Sandford, none of us put Max Verstappen in the front, not even our team prediction. So that is quite funny. What we have been
Quite mad.
discussing are possible replacements for Checo. And I think this is a theme in Chaos in the Paddock where I love asking people, especially after significant races. And for me, Monza is significant as a Ferrari fan. I always think Monza's fun. I was supposed to go, but I ended up not going. I sold my tickets. So I
Bad
think that
times.
was maybe like not really sad times. I think everything happens for a reason. I feel like if I went, the results wouldn't have been the same. I'm not a very lucky charm.
I plead the fifth.
This is the part where you give a compliment. But okay. No, but
I haven't been able to test out the luck situation as well as I would have liked so far, so I think it's just safer if I just don't comment yet.
oh my God. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a very lucky person sometimes when it comes to F1. No, actually, no. Sanford, I was lucky because that's where I got to see Lando's first win. I didn't go to Miami, which is why I was very, very scared that he wasn't on top of the podium every time I was there. because I thought I was unlucky, but I think I broke my own curse by being in Sanford and watching that win. But when we think about how many seats are left on the grid, it's ideally the V-Carb and Sauber. They still have one missing driver now that everyone else is announced, contract extensions, blah, blah, blah. I always think it's fun to see other people's version of their dream grid. And I always say, I don't care if you're doing it from a, fun perspective, delusional perspective, or if you're gonna be all smart, which you usually do that. You like to be smart about making
And I
choices.
do all of the above.
You've been the most sensible one out of this pairing. I know you are always very sensible when you explain things to me. Oh,
That's
sweaty.
different when it comes to predictions and grids, though, because I've got a lot of dream grids, and I've kind of I could have been worse with this. I feel like I've had a bit of fun with it, but also there's some plausibility with it as well, I think.
Why don't you tell us and elaborate on your fun, smart grid?
Well, Red Bull I've immediately had some fun with. I'm keeping Verstappen, but because of comments made recent times, I've decided I want to put Kyle Larson in there so that they can sort out which one of them is the better F1 driver. That would be a lot of fun for me. Mercedes, I'm keeping Hamilton and Russell. I like the pairing, and I think if the car's up to par, then they can do whatever they need to do with that. McLaren for spice, and because I'd love to see what he could do with this iteration of the car. Piastri and Ricciardo, that would be fun. Um, for Ferrari, I'm keeping Leclerc and Sainz. If it ain't broke, don't
On
necessarily
my
fix it.
heart.
And if Hamilton's not going in to replace you, then you don't need to go anywhere. Williams keeping Albon, but because there's a seat free next to him, I think why not be bold, do something different? And this driver has learned the ropes a bit in other areas, and why not take a chance, especially if you're Williams? So stick Jamie Chadwick in there alongside Albon, and let's see how she goes.
Ooh.
Um, Aston Martin keep Alonso, bin off Stroll because dear Lord, it needs to happen, and stick Brogovich in there so that at least we can find out what he's capable of. And then if he's bad, at least we know, and we're not constantly wondering. Alpine, keep doing. I like this. And to keep you happy, but also because if he wins F2, this would be great to see. Put Bortoletto in there. Sauber, poor chair, because again, a lot of this is thinking if see how they do over a season, and then if we want to be brute and helmet marker about it, we can just chop a lot of these people away. But at least they've had a chance over a full season. So stick chair in the Sauber, and then because they also deserve a chance, and they've been doing a lot of testing here, there, and everywhere, and again just to find out what we are dealing with, put Tatiana Calderon in that Sauber as well, alongside him. When it comes to Minardi, put Lawson in there and then stick Iwasa in there as well, because he's also a driver that everyone seems to have forgotten about, and he's just been lost over in Super Formula or wherever. So have him in there, so that'd be nice for that. And then Haas, you stick with Hulk because it's a team where he's doing well at the moment, and I don't want him to do badly next year. And then you keep Behrman as well with him.
You just said Minardi. You're not a fan of saying V-carb, are
Yes,
you?
it's a stupid name.
Do you think they're gonna change it?
As long as it's not something dumber, then hopefully. I mean, I thought AlphaTauri was already a bit clutching at straws, but they managed to find a way to outdo themselves.
I thought AlphaTauri was still okay. I mean, Toro Rosso was still going to be the best one, but Minardi, that just sent me. I mean, you did a very sensible grid. I mean, you put Bortoletto in there to keep me happy, which is
I knew
good.
that would do me a lot of favors.
You don't always have to keep me happy, Timo. I'm fine with a little bit of a different mix-up as well. I know a friend of mine put MotoGP riders on the grid.
I mean, that would be interesting. This is where I had to kind of taper myself a little bit because there's so many different avenues. Like I was thinking about IndyCar drivers, I was thinking about Extreme E drivers, I was thinking about other drivers we've just not seen in a while, or drivers that have been in F1 but have left. Or wouldn't it be fun if you stuck Alonso in that Red Bull or something? But I just thought, no, I'm going to be here for too long. I have other stuff I need to do today. This is going to get out of hand. Let's just make some decisions. And bit of craziness, but not too much.
I mean, craziness is always very, very welcome here. We even turned that we like some of us even removed the whole current F1 grid and stuck in F2 and F3 drivers just to, just to have a bit of fun. I stuck myself in because I have a racing license, just not a single seater one. So
I'm going to have to
imagine
rethink
that.
all of this for next time I come on this podcast and see if I can outdo all of that now. You give me a challenge. Excellent.
Oh, definitely, because the next time I'm going to come up with a bunch of different stuff where you guys will have to make sure that you know a lot of other drivers. I mean, I'm not afraid for you because you do follow a lot of different other racing series that are, that have a lot of different drivers. So you always have to have them at hand. And I mean, I stuck in DTM drivers in mine. I mean, Rene Rast was in Formula E. I said, he might have fun in the Williams. So, it's always cool to see where people can go. But speaking for Baku, there's another piece of news that I do want to discuss with you. And this is a yes or no
Hmm.
question, but you can also elaborate. I think Magnussen's penalty. How did we feel? Are you happy with it? Yes or no?
Neither.
That was not an answer, Timo.
It was a one-word answer. Um, it makes sense because he's obviously got enough points to have this dished out to him. So in that perspective, yes. No, because it's potentially his last season in F1. But yes, because Behrman gets to have a go and this is going to be an interesting test for him. But no, because K-Mag at Baku with a bit of chaos, that'd be a lot of fun as well, especially if he's causing some of it.
Do you think it was fair?
In the spirit of the rules that we have in place, yes.
So for people who aren't, who obviously people are listening to this and not seeing Timo's face, he's looking very confused at his own decision. Just wanted to put that out there. Because Gasly did say that he thought it was too harsh. So, I mean, for that
Yeah,
collision.
but he's also done stuff this season where he's gone a bit over the line, which has been entertaining, and I don't really mind it. I'm looking at his overtake of Sargeant in Miami, for example, as a premium piece of content where I just thought that was never going to work, but that was fun. Um, so on that perspective, it's a shame because we're not allowed to do as much as we used to when it comes to hard racing. It's the same way that I thought Ricardo's penalty was a bit harsh. Um, but hey ho.
Oh my God. I guess we're just gonna have to wait and see how Ollie Berman will fare. I think that's gonna be enough chaos in Baku anyways, because now Lando's very hungry. I'm pretty sure Charles is now even hungrier to win again. Sainz probably wants to win again in that Ferrari. Red Bull. Why did I want to say Red Bull? Actually, I wanted Sainz to go to Red Bull. There we go. I photoshopped him to manifest him in the Red Bull. So we all had like a Carlos Sainz background with him in the Red Bull suit.
It looks a treat, I can see.
His face is a treat. Carlos Sainz is a treat. So him in a Red Bull, I mean, granted, he will look good in every single racing suit he has on. Then again, this isn't a team you play for. So, you
Not
know.
not to my knowledge, no.
So we had him photoshopped and all of the different teams we were manifesting. We just kept the Williams one because we knew that's that's the place he was more likely going to go to, so we'd have the post of that. But I'm going to ask you to predict your top three for Baku before we end this podcast. And I know this might seem early to a lot of people, but I do want to challenge you because this is going to be your journalist prediction that I'm going to put, and you can add on to it.
Well, I'm hoping we get a wild Grand Prix, which means a bit of a mixed up podium. So I'm going to go a little bit left field in keeping with the theme of this podcast. So let's see. Albon P3,
Whoa,
Cardo P2, and oh, wouldn't that be fun? Alonso P1.
Timo, are you sure you're a journalist?
Yeah, I am, but I have a fun side.
Okay.
I was thinking it'd be more fun if Fernando Alonso won in Singapore because of history there, but
Oh
also
yeah.
Baku would just be fun.
Baku would be fun. I mean, I'm gonna lock this in as your top three. You're not allowed to change it. That's your challenge for this weekend.
And that's fine by me because if this
You
if
can
I
add
pull
like,
this off,
you can
I'm
add
gonna
like the
look great.
sentences. No,
Well,
if
Fernando
this
Alonso because what a place to
you
do
deserve a medal
his
if this
next race win.
happens. Like I'll fly and give you a medal. I'll have one made. Like I'll take Lando's one from whichever race he won and I'll just like put it over you.
I'll take it. I mean, look at it this way. Alonso, what a place to get his next race win that he's been at for so long. Be just brilliant to do that on a street circuit and just show his wily old fox ability to take advantage of these kind of opportunities. Ricardo, because then he's guaranteed that Red Bull seat. So if he can do that and survive all the chaos, especially if Perez takes himself out through kind of all this chaos happening around him and he just wins it himself. And then Albon with the P3 will probably propel Williams up the standings to the point where they are going to get a shit ton more money for next year, and that's just going to help things dramatically, and that's just a lot of fun. And who wouldn't love to see all of that?
Oh my God. Maybe I need you back here after Baku. But then again, I'm in Nashville, so I might have to send someone else with you, but that's fine. That's okay. You'll fare well without me. I think you'll even be happier.
I wouldn't go that far. There we go. I'm learning.
See, good job, Timo. Well, that's all we have time for today because I know you have a lot of other stuff you need to do with your six, seven other podcasts that you do. So thank you
I
for
have another one in an
being,
hour.
I know. Thank you for being here, and I will see you after Baku.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I had a lot of fun.
And that was Chaos in the Paddock.